Welcome to this place, to the Earth and Spirit Center. My name is Joe Phelps, and I am a leader in Earth and Spirit's Listen, Learn, Act program, along with Di Kerrigan, you'll hear from in just a second, and Deborah Laporte, who is in the back of the room. Deb, raise your hand, please. These folks help, are the life and soul behind Listen, Learn, Act, and I'm very grateful to them. Welcome to this place. This is the Earth and Spirit Center's headquarters. We headquarter here. We're all over the city doing different works of love and action and teaching mindfulness meditation, doing earth care, and working on social justice issues, and that's what this is part of tonight. If you're here for the first time, welcome. A couple of things you might want to know, and that is there are 2 unisex restrooms right behind us. Just help yourself. There are also some refreshments off to the side. And since we're all people about my age, I'm going to remind us, let's turn off our cell phones real quick. Back in the old days, I thought it was funny to say, put it on stun, but I realized that's not funny. That's not funny. We have a number of distinguished guests with us. We welcome you all. We're grateful to the media who are here. Earth and Spirit has been a partner with for these community conversations with Metro Louisville and their Lean into Louisville division. We're going to do another one of these in 2 weeks. We'll have another community conversation here in this space Monday, May 15th, 7 o'clock again. The title of that one, this next program is Beyond a Few Bad Apples, Transparency and Accountability in Louisville Metro Police Department. We'll have Attorney Kellie Watson, who's the chair of the Civilian Review and Accountability Board. And we're also going to have the Louisville Inspector General, Ed Hartness, who will be with us to help explain how these things will be implemented. And I hope you will be here for that. This event's going to be recorded, and it's also being Facebook live stream. Thanks to Ariel. Thank you very much for your attention to that. So we will begin this gathering. And I'm going to start us with a phrase that I used as a minister, which was what I did before coming here. At funerals and at weddings, I would gather us together with this sentence: love brings us here. And in a sense, I think that same phrase works for what we're doing right here. Love brings us here. We love people. We love our city. We love the possibility that our city could be transformed, that this DOJ report and the consent decree has the possibility of transforming our city if we change it from words into action. And that's why we're here tonight. How do we make the word flesh? As I used to say in my old career, how can we keep the focus on the issues that have come up since 2020? It is extremely important that love has brought you here this evening, and I thank you for coming to start out this conversation. We're going to introduce our 2 conversation leaders. Di Kerrigan will introduce our first one. Bye.
Thank you, Joe. Wow, what a great crowd. Thank you all for coming out tonight. It is my honor to introduce Councilwoman Paula McCraney, who was born and raised in Tulsa, Oklahoma. She earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Business Administration from Oklahoma State University and obtained a Master of Arts degree in Management and Leadership from Webster University. She is currently pursuing a doctoral degree at Spalding College with an anticipated graduation date of December 2023. Get this. She is writing her dissertation on the DOJ report and impending consent decree and perceptions surrounding it. Councilwoman McCraney was elected in November 6, 2018 as the 3rd citizen to serve on the Metro Council for District 7 and re-elected for another 4-year term in 2022. She proudly represents 19 suburban cities and 6 neighborhoods.
Wow.
The district's boundaries include major thoroughfares of Brownsboro Road, Westport Road, Hubbard's Lane, and Shelbyville Road. This year, she was unanimously selected to serve as the Majority Caucus Chair. She also serves on the Budget Committee and Committee on Committees. In addition to her committee duties on the council, she serves as the co-chair of the Metro Council Women's Caucus and is an appointed member of the Equity in Contracting and Procurement Task Force and the Juneteenth Jubilee Commission. Councilwoman McCraney has a diverse work background, including a combined 40 years of experience in banking, human resources, public relations, and government. She has collaborated with other council members, the mayor, and various city agencies to make Louisville an even better place to live. She has co-sponsored several critical pieces of legislation, including the ban of no-knock search warrants and the creation of the Commission for Persons with Disabilities. She was the lead sponsor and researcher who created the landmark Civilian Review and Accountability Board ordinance. Most recently, McCraney served on the board that helped establish Juneteenth as an official paid holiday for Louisville Metro employees. She also sponsored and helped to write the first link law in Kentucky and the first one in the United States to mandate link training to law enforcement. The link acknowledges an established connection between cruelty to animals and domestic violence, child maltreatment, and elder abuse.
Wow.
Ms. McCraney has been recognized by numerous organizations, including the United States Congress, the Commonwealth of Kentucky, Business and Professional Women in River City, and the Public Relations Society of America. She's lived in the city of St. Matthews for the past 28 years. She's been married for 37 years to her husband, Billy, and they have 2 adult sons, a daughter-in-law, and they are pet grandparents to a golden doodle and a Bichon Frise. So, welcome, Paula.
Mark, why don't you come up as well as I make your introduction, and folks come in and grab a seat. Thank you. It is my, I have the honor of trying to introduce someone who's living about 4 lives in the space of time that most of us live 1 life, and that is Mark Murphy. Mark is a celebrated attorney with the Stites and Harbison Law Firm, the largest and most prestigious law firm in our state. He focuses his law practice on white-collar crime, antitrust, environmental crime, healthcare fraud, tax fraud, which puts him in front of the Department of Justice for quite a bit. In addition to that, though, he also accepts appointment by the courts for indigent representation. So he does the gamut of legal work. He's been a law professor. He was our Commonwealth County Attorney in 95 and 96. Many of us know him for his political cartoons that are in the Courier Journal, Louisville Public Media, and other places. Let's give him a round of applause. Because I tell you, I think he is Louisville's truth teller. With his pen, with his craft, he packs hard-hitting, on-target messages that people can read and look at and understand at a deeper level than I think in other ways. He's the chair of the legal aid, Louisville Legal Aid Campaign. He's the head basketball coach for the Nativity Academy basketball team. And if you, as I know many people in this room did, were present for the 2020 protests following the murder of Breonna Taylor, you know Mark Murphy was down there on his bike, speaking and advocating and being a voice for the people. It's a great honor for us to have Paula and Mark Murphy with us here tonight. Can we give them a round of applause?
I told Deb that after Paula's introduction, it was okay if she just said, and then there's this guy.
This other guy.
But that was very nice. So, story of my life. It's an honor to be asked here. Thank you. It's an honor and a privilege to be in front of people who have been studying this issue and who care about this issue and who, unfortunately, if you look at the color of your skin and look at the back of your hand, are in a minority of the people of that kind in our community that are unfortunately paying attention and caring about these things. But it is the story of my life that I didn't see you say that. But it is the story of my life that I'm asked to help host a conversation because we're not speechifying up here. I mean, I'm a lawyer and she's a councilwoman and a politician. We could speechify until the cows came home.
Till 8:30.
Yeah, it's
I'm a
8:30.
politician, and those are fighting words. Public servant.
Who is literally writing a PhD on the subject matter that we're here
That's
for.
what a PhD is about.
So with that, I have to ask you to begin with your comments because hopefully you're far enough along in your studies because you have to finish by December that you have something to say.
Well, I might have a few things. Well, let me just start off by saying that you heard that I'm from Tulsa, Oklahoma. And it's unfortunate that a lot of people don't understand the richness of my hometown. In fact, Tulsa, Oklahoma was the home of the Tulsa race massacres. A lot of people call them the Tulsa riots, but they were not riots. They were indeed massacres. This happened in 1921 when the city of Tulsa on the north side was vibrant. In fact, black people had banks, they had hotels, schools, you name it. Why? Because they were not allowed to have those things or entertain themselves or go into department stores or anything else in the other part of Tulsa. So they had to create their own, and that they did. That area of town was called Black Wall Street. So they were thriving. So an incident occurred in an elevator when a black young man ran out of the elevator, a white young woman screamed. So the townsmen didn't want to let that die. Everything after that happened. Suffice it to say, they were upset. They started a massacre in that they burned the entire area of Black Wall Street to the ground. I tell that story to let you know that I'm from a rich history that does not die with me. But not only that, I did not know that history the entire time I was growing up in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Wow.
Why? Because it was against the law for people to talk about that era. My parents didn't talk about it. I learned about it my first year in college when I introduced myself to someone. They said, "Oh, you're from Tulsa. That's where they had the riots." I said, "Yeah." And then I went and studied it. That was my first introduction. So at this age of my life, I don't let anything go by when it comes to race relations. And here I am. I might have a few things to say about that
Tonight and then later on in the doctorate.
Let's don't even talk about that doctorate. In fact, I was going to do my dissertation on gentrification. I had gotten an approval. If you go through the process of getting your doctorate, you have to get approved for your assignment and your project. And I had written everything that I needed to write in order to get approved, and I got approved. Then the DOJ report came out, and I said, "Oh, I want to write about that."
Yeah.
And so I went to my professor, asked could I change my topic, and was told, are you sure you have time to do that? You're already finished with your approvals. You have to rewrite your literature review, and I mean all this, the list of things I had to do over. I thought, it's worth it. I'm going to do it. Now, if you see the bags under my eyes, you know why. And they let me change my subject to the DOJ report. And I have found some incredible information. I am just in the beginning stages of researching what DOJ reports mean and consent decrees, but it ain't looking pretty.
There's not a good history.
Not a good history.
Not talking about Louisville. Consent decrees, you probably
Consent
find out,
decrees.
don't have a good history.
They don't. What we have discovered so far is that cities have been mandated under consent decrees. However, you will see incremental changes, and those changes last a little while. Then after so many years, the police departments are back at it again.
Yeah.
Here's a quote. It's like it's scripted. We have never met before this meeting. Here's a quote about what happens with consent decrees, to your point, Councilwoman. Police are very good at outlasting the political short-term need for them to reform. And you typically see the same cycle of reform. Then police using increasing crime and a fear of crime as a reason to lessen reform.
Fear of crime. Yeah.
And we'll get into this a little bit more later, but that's exactly the point you were making.
Yes.
Let me summarize so we can get the discussion going, because we truly do want this to be a discussion. I made some points, although, again, I'm not writing a dissertation on it, and Councilwoman informed me right before we started that she's even found typographical errors in the DOJ report. That's how careful she's reading it.
That's good.
So hopefully tonight 75% of our time is yours. But here are the things that came to me on the basis of my life and experience and the things that I've done and that I'm thinking about. And I'm going to not bury the lead. When the shootings were taking place at Old National Bank, police responded quickly, effectively, and in a way that the community generally applauded. People were grievously hurt. My daughter-in-law it treated some of the survivors in her job at the trauma ward at Louisville Emergency Hospital. Fabulous. One of the first things I thought of, though, after grieving for the victims, was that, police can be trained. And they can be trained to do the hardest of things. They can be trained to run into a hail of bullets, or at least into a room where a man is shooting those bullets, and do so well, and do so competently, and do so without apparent fear of their own injury or death. If they can be trained to do that, they can be trained to not be racist. And they can be trained to obey rules of engagement. And they can be trained to embody. I said there were 35 and you said there were 36. No, I said there were 36 because there's a typo. There's only 35. But the DOJ made 35 very specific recommendations. And those can be put into place. It's easy for me to say because I'm not a law enforcement officer, but it seems to me that those 35 things can be trained into young men and women much more easily in a vacuum. And the problem is there isn't a vacuum than rushing into a building where killing is taking place. The second thought that I had was that, and I truly embraced this in the DOJ report, is that I think the community expected to see a lot about police, and they expected to see some about the mayor's office, the city. I didn't expect to see such a concentration in the DOJ report about the conditions, the economic and systemic racist conditions, generationally, that have existed in this city that gave rise to the circumstances that created the situations that we're dealing with the DOJ report. And again, not burying the lead when we conclude tonight, one of the things I'm going to urge people to think about going forward, I was asked by a reporter earlier what my opinion was, for instance, about revealing the names of the individual police, or the individual, you could have asked about the individual judges as well. And I think that's fine, it's important, we have to have accountability. But I hope that we keep our eye on the ball, that we're not just so focused on assigning individual blame to an individual officer who did or didn't do a particular thing. They have to be held accountable, and the fact that they haven't been held accountable to this point is one of the problems.
That's a problem. Yeah.
But the bigger picture is, if we don't address the generational issues, the 9th Street divide issue, the Tulsa, the Black Wall Street massacre issues that exist in Louisville and have existed here for generations, we're going to be back facing another consent decree in 25 years. Finally, I want the community to stay focused as much as they can on the fact that on this very face page, when we've studied this at length, but the very title of the report doesn't just talk about the police. We think about the DOJ report and LMPD. Equal blame has been assessed patterns and practices of discriminatory, racist, unconstitutional behavior has been assessed and alleged against, well, not alleged, proved against the city and its supervisory role for the police. The police don't act in a vacuum. The police are employees, for better or worse. The chief of police is an employee, for better or worse. And the DOJ made it very clear after it went through the generational issues and poverty and everything else that has given rise to the circumstances that we have to allow the police to wander around the way they did. It's the city management. It's our elected officials who have allowed them to do that, who have allowed them to slide. And I hope that we keep our eye on the ball in that regard, moving forward. I know you are. That there are particulars that need to be addressed. There's the small pieces, but the bigger picture is that we have to hold the mayor, whoever that mayor is at any point in time. It's not about an individual. It's about generations of individuals who we've let slide in that regard.
Well, that certainly is true. Let us even go back into history for Louisville, Kentucky. In 1968, a white officer stopped a black gentleman. He was a school teacher. He stopped him because he was driving a white vehicle that was identified in some type of robbery. As he was talking to the gentleman and apprehending him, he was roughing him up a little bit. This other gentleman driving by witnessed this, Manfred Reed. He is still alive today. He simply asked the officer, "What's going on? Why are you arresting him?" Words ensued, and he was arrested also, just for simply asking the question. Let's fast forward to 2020. Civil unrest, only because an officer and officers killed a black woman in her home based on a faulty warrant. Fraudulent. Actually, there's faulty
with all due respect,
and there's
It
fraudulent.
wasn't an accident.
It was
wasn't a
intentional.
mistake. Exactly.
That's the whole point. These things have been intentional, but there has not been an intentional delivery of supervisory roles to correct behavior. If we are as intentional in correcting behavior as the nation has been intentional in doing redlining, gentrification, and all of these police abuses, then I think we can right a lot of wrongs and start healing in our communities. But when Breonna Taylor was killed, because there was no accountability, people were outraged. And you recall, it was almost a whole year of protesting. And the people who were protesting and the allies that joined them were simply saying, we want justice. No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace. And because there was no justice, people are still hurting. People are simply wanting accountability. And they want the police officers who are involved in the dastardly deeds to be held accountable. I have to say this, and I just hate to share this, but it's in the public domain. I want to recognize my colleague, Councilwoman Betsy Rui here. She can verify what I'm about to say. This is so unfortunate. The last council meeting we had, there were protesters there. And they were really crying out that we do not approve the health center, the wellness center for the police officers. And it's not because they don't think the officers need health and wellness. It's because they don't feel they've gotten justice. So why would we continue to spend money on the police department? So we sat there and we were listening to them. But a couple of people stood up, came to the podium, and they said, the community is celebrating one of the officers in the bank incident, who is being held as a hero. But they identified a laundry list of abuses from that particular officer. So how do we expect to ever heal in this community if there are officers on the force who have done things, have not been held accountable, then do great things, and are held heroes? That's where we are in this community. And that's why this DOJ report is important.
The DOJ report, I think, was thorough. Typographic players, aside. But one thing that, ever since I was Commonwealth's attorney here in Jefferson County, that's concerned me about the community, the policing of the community, and the power that exists in Louisville is even the DOJ report. Correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure she will, if she found it somewhere, is the FOP.
Oh, yeah.
And
Say that again.
is the FOP. Oh, you want me to
What
say it
is
again?
the FOP?
Well, yeah, so the Fraternal Order of Police, everyone knows what that is, and they stand in many places, in Cleveland, in Baltimore, in New Orleans, where there have been some of the most recent consent decrees, leading the charge of convincing the community that the consent decree is making the community unsafe, and leading the charge and convincing the community and its taxpayers that it's costing too much money, because these things cost tens of millions of dollars a year to the city, more money that isn't being paid to build, housing for the
Affordable
homeless.
homes.
Exactly.
The homeless.
And
All of a sudden,
leading the
we're
charge.
concerned about the homeless.
What's that?
All of a sudden, we're concerned about the homeless.
Yeah, exactly. It's the FOP. And I don't know about the FOPs in Cleveland and New Orleans or in Baltimore. I do know that in Louisville, Kentucky, it's an extraordinarily strong voice. And obviously they're not elected by us, they're elected by the people they call their union members. It's, in my understanding, not a proper union in that regard. It's not a Teamsters sort of organization. They act like the Teamsters in the 30s and 40s. And the FOP, and I know this is being recorded, the FOP has bullied the police and the mayor's office for decades in Louisville, Kentucky. And I am not confident in the city moving forward and following through on what will ultimately be agreed to in the consent decree. You might want to spend like 2 minutes on what the consent decree is and everything, unless people understand that. But when that's finally negotiated and it's filed in court and it's an order of a federal judge, it doesn't work. And there can't be real reform until there's reform of the FOP. And
It's a
roll the
cultural
cloaks.
change. It's going to take a cultural change. And it's going to take a heart change. Let me give you a real life story. I was running for re-election in November. And when you run for re-election, you often beg for money, right? That's the one thing. But beyond begging for money, you ask for endorsements. Endorsements are important to a degree in that people that see who are endorsing you, they might belong to that organization or they like that organization. They, oh, well, if they support her, then I support her. So we set out as public servants to get endorsements. So as everyone does, we sign up to get an endorsement from the FOP. So I walk in as boldly as I can, sit down in my interview, and they're lined up behind the table were about 5 FOP members. And I'm sitting there because I have a record of supporting the police. I have a record, you know my record. So I wasn't a new person coming to be interviewed. I had a record, so you knew what I stood for. You knew what I had done in the last 4 years. So I had nothing to hide. I was pretty bold. I'm sitting there, and the FOP president looked me straight in the eye and said to me, "We will not support you for 2 reasons. One, you were the architect of the Civilian Review Board. 2, you did not approve the police bargaining agreement last year because you asked for more reforms." Well, now, that is true. I did not sign off on the police bargaining agreement. I did ask for more money, sent it back to the negotiations table, and got more money for the police officers. But I ultimately did not sign it because the reforms that they promised us were cut in half. I say to you today that had we done the reforms then, we probably wouldn't be in this situation with the DOJ report today.
Wow.
So yes, the FOP is strong in this community, and the mayor's office is generally listening to what they say and buckling under pressure.
Judges need the FOP endorsement. Prosecutors need the FOP endorsement. Metro council members would love, just because it's an important endorsement to have it. And
I got elected without it.
I believe in unions. I believe in protection and the work that unions can do on behalf of their members. So maybe my complaint is with, it has been in the past with particulars in the FOP. But to me, it still comes down to the elected officials that we have chosen to run our city. That's an organization that's representing their people. They have a fiduciary obligation, perhaps. I don't know. I haven't studied the law on that, to represent their members' rights and responsibilities. But the mayor doesn't. You know, the mayor has an obligation to us. His fiduciary duty is to us. Again, any of the given mayors, and we've been let down in that regard.
But the FOP, while they have a responsibility to protect the people in that union, they need to understand right and wrong. They need to understand relationships, and they totally dismiss all of that at the expense of protecting their own.
Right.
When you are wrong,
Always.
you are wrong. But if an FOP officer or the club does not speak up against bad behavior, then it perpetuates more bad behavior. Unfortunately, that's in the FOP, but as Mark stated, that's not what the mayor is mandated to do. The mayor is responsible for LMPD, and he should be running the FOP and making certain that the chief is doing his or her job in holding officers accountable.
And to our point this evening, to get us back on track with the DOJ report, there's no consideration of that. If I'm not into that. There's no mention of that, and the police department in Louisville is treated as if it's a police department in a vacuum, and that there isn't this enormously powerful and strong. In fact, I didn't see where they even interviewed. They would have interviewed FOP members and perhaps some officers in the course of their interviews, but I don't believe they're interviewed in their role as president, secretary, treasurer of the FOP.
It doesn't say it in the report if they did.
Oh, thank God.
No.
Feel better about that. So it's already 7:30 or more. You've heard us talking. You should hear her talk more because she's the one who knows things. But please, I know there's a microphone getting ready.
Yeah,
to
we'll
pass
walk around
People
and-
will have their own very important thoughts and concerns.
Okay, we're going to walk around and do that. While I find someone raise your hand and I'll walk toward you. Thank you. Was the mayor elected with or without the FOP endorsement?
Interesting. I don't know that.
If he was elected without it, why does he buckle to them?
Whether he's
And what do we do about that?
Well, history has shown whether they're endorsed by them or not endorsed by them, they buckle up under the pressure. It is a powerful organization, but powerful organizations have been dismantled in history. It's going to take us to do that. It takes the voices of the people to make sure that you are expressing yourself and saying to these powers to be that we shall not continue supporting this behavior. But if we're all afraid, if we don't speak up, then nothing ever happens. I was at a forum not too long ago, and it had a couple of former presidents of a bank. It had an FOP officer. It had a couple of people there talking about the DOJ report. And the FOP officer said they pretty much don't support the DOJ report.
Oh, with all due respect, Councilwoman, I think they're more aggressive than that. I wasn't there. And then they toned it down a bit there. But they issued a statement immediately, as I recall.
Yes, they did.
And it was that basically it was, oh, this is more of the same crap.
Yes.
And we're not going to play ball.
Right.
And they have never played ball with reforms. So,
Question back here. You mentioned that the report is kind of encompassing. It's more than just the police department. It addresses societal things, city government, possibly the FOP. Does the consent decree, will that affect more than just the police department? Will it affect the FOP, city council, mayor's office?
Well, here's the deal. They tell us it's going to take maybe up to a year for the consent decree to be negotiated. I hope it doesn't take that long. But it's going to be up to the voices of this community to make sure that consent decree is comprehensive. There are dates out there already where you can go and speak to the DOJ. Say to them that you want reforms not only in the police department, but you want the FOP held accountable. Some kind of way it can be in that consent decree. Don't know how it's going to happen because so many people buckle under, the pressure of them. But you have to voice it anyhow. So the consent decree is yet to be formed, but it's really going to be up to us to hold the mayor's office accountable, since they will be at the table negotiating the consent decree, to make sure he understands and his staff understands what we want to see in that decree.
and to your question, the report the findings and the recommendations are quite specifically as clear about the city. Louisville Metro is how it's identified, as it is the LMPD. So yes, the consent decree eventually negotiated should include the same number and quality of recommendations and requirements. And we said we were going to do this earlier, so I mean, I feel like obviously this is a very educated group, specifically educated about these issues, but the consent decree, we have the report, which has no effect yet, other than to begin the negotiations for the consent decree, and then that is going to be negotiated. You'll probably participate in this negotiation.
Certainly will.
And
I hope you do too.
I'm Councilwoman McCray, and I'm writing a PhD about this. And we're going to involve ourselves in these negotiations. And then it becomes entered as a federal order, binding upon the parties from federal court. Now, as other cities have found, who have had consent decrees, as I mentioned, Cleveland, specifically Baltimore and New Orleans, they, I wouldn't even say it's a mixed bag. It's wildly disappointing, the ultimate impact. There's the original, I think about it as a campfire. I think about it as we've been wandering in the wilderness for all these decades, and we finally found a place in the snow where we're going to sit and we're going to make a campfire. And the DOJ came in, lit our campfire for us. But if we don't tend it, and if we don't keep bringing wood to it, and keep providing fuel for it, and we all just go to sleep, to extend the metaphor possibly too far, it's going to die out. And to answer another question, I think you were looking it up too. The FOP endorsed Mayor Dura from Jefferson.
Yes.
That's right.
Question
So,
back here.
yes.
So we were both talking about accountability earlier, especially mayors and chiefs of police. We've had a number of chiefs from different parts of the country over the last several years. Is the problem so endemic, so systemic, that we can't get a chief from somewhere else that is not of like mind with this path? It's obviously not right.
Well, this is opinion, but chiefs are a part of the Big Blue as well.
Yep.
It's a club, and it's like being in a sorority. I can relate it to that because I'm in a sorority. And while I might fall out with my sister because she's doing something that is of nasty behavior, I dare you to hurt my sister. So I think that club is so ingrained that even a chief of police has so much authority until it stops at the FOP level, where it's like, I know, well, and then there's that immunity. Let's don't forget, that's a whole nother story, and they're protected. But people misinterpret that as well, because if you do something that is a bad behavior that impugns or violates people's First Amendment, Fourth Amendment, then you can be fired. But there's a process you have to go through. Sometimes the chiefs or their lieutenants or whomever provides their supervision don't even try to hold them accountable. In fact, studies have shown they turn a blind eye. And when you don't hold people accountable, they continue to do the same dastardly deeds because they think it's okay. Oh, I won't get in trouble.
And also, until the summer of 2020, when you talk about accountability and my campfire analogy, until the summer of 2020, with some exceptions, it was only the people whose constitutional rights were being violated, generally, or quite specifically, who were trying to raise a voice and raise a complaint and say, hey, by the way, our constitutional rights are being violated. Also including if you shoot my son, maybe that's violating his constitutional rights too. And so when I say we've got to keep the campfire burning, that means east of 9th Street. It means everywhere in the community, because the kind of leverage, one of the statistics in the DOJ report is that is the black population of Louisville 24% under the whatever the latest census is that they found, and on the police force it's 16, 18, something like that. It's not representative, very small percentage. But, and this is a room of exceptions and exceptional people, obviously, but with some notable exceptions, I would say, and it's frightening, but generally speaking, to most people who are even considering themselves politically active people, people who consider themselves good people, and people who consider themselves even progressive and liberal, I think there's a decent chance that the DOJ report's findings have slipped down the river and that they've moved on to the next thing. And that's, I hate to say this in front of black mothers, but they may not pay attention again until the next young man or woman is shot.
Well, they're going to pay attention because I am writing my dissertation. But not only that, the people that I am identifying for my research study are suburban residents.
Yeah.
People who, okay, so I have identified the people in the suburban cities who are under the umbrella of the LMPD, yet have their own police departments. So they are not only a little bit removed from reality of LMPD, but they're certainly geographically removed. And yes, they may have said, oh, those riots, what they did in 2020, that Breonna Taylor case, oh, I'm so glad that's over.
Where's Eddie Merlot's?
In
What
fact,
happened to Eddie Merlot?
yeah. Well, and they people still think that downtown is boarded up. Now, mind you, I am a representative in a 92% white district. So during the 2020 civil unrest, I was getting nasty, scathing emails. People were asking, what do black people want? Tell me what black people want. Why are you all so mad? I had to answer those emails, and I have every last one of them because they will become a book. I dumped them all. So I am purposely going to use in my study the people who may have forgotten that civil unrest occurred. The people who want to forget that they have as equal of responsibility in healing this community as I do. So we'll see. No, they're not going to forget. They're not going to.
Trust that now. I feel better about it.
Question ready. Councilwoman McCraney, I want to ask a contrast a period of, I think, leadership of the council with one of weakness. So in 2021, in the allocation of ARPA funds, not a lot of people paid a lot of attention to that, but our city was ahead of others in two ways. One, we allocated almost all of it quickly, the council did. And the council, in a partnership with them, they were very strategic. Many cities haven't allocated, they just said, oh, everyone's going to get a little bit more of everything. $100 million on affordable housing, some really key we used one-time opportunity to invest on one-time advantages. During that period, Chief Erica Shields came to the council and said, I want $75 million for reform. And the council said, we'll give you half of that, right? Is that
Roughly.
about right? Okay. So we now have the DOJ report. The new mayor says, even though it's even worse than we ever imagined, we'd like to use that one-time opportunity to help jumpstart a renovation of the Metro Police headquarters.
And a wellness center.
With no sign that we'll ever find $37 million again to even start the reform initiatives. And the council, in spite of your leadership, strong advocacy the other way, how did that happen? How did we get from saying, we know what we need, it's now more clear than ever, 20-5, including our Democratic majority, said, we'll just do whatever they say.
Well, it's the makeup of the council, let's start there, and it's the cowardness of the council members. I said it, you can go back and tell them I said it. Because we have to ask the questions, and I'm going to tell you something, I get very disturbed during budget time because I'm fighting with people who don't have the same ideas of what justice means as I do. So when they're socking money into GBI and these different programs, they're feeling good about themselves because they think, okay, just give them the money, They're going to do the work. They're going to help with, race relations. They're going to help with, crime. And then they sit back and they don't ask the questions. They don't hold them accountable. They don't pull them into the council and say, hey, where's this money going? What have you done? Show me your record. I am about outcomes. But a lot of my council members are not about outcomes. They're about give it, and then they're on to something else. This $17 million that was just asked for the renovation of the police department and
17 and a half, no, it was half of 35.
Yeah, 17 and a half asked for in the ARPA funds. We had already stabilized what we were going to do with that $17 million. We had already stated we were going to sock some more. I was on the affordable housing task force where the people on that task force wanted to put about $40 million into affordable housing. And I had a fit. We got it up to $89 million in affordable housing. And then they didn't want anything else to do with me. They were like, okay, you got to get off my committee. But so other people, the economic development team and some other task force, they wanted to spend the rest of the money. And so we had it all allocated. So in comes this mayor with all great intention, discovered the $17.5 million is still available. And asked, okay, so can I have that money instead of you all dishing it out here and there, here and there? And somehow, one down the road, we agreed. Unbeknownst to us, though, they come and they present that they want to renovate the headquarters, which we had already socked money into last year, and then a wellness center. And they said, the DOJ report says, and they hid behind the DOJ report saying that it's mandating. That's one of the things that it said, the police need wellness. It says in the DOJ report that, yes, look into officer wellness, but it also mandates that they come up with a plan. It didn't say do it right away without a plan. It says to them to come up with a plan of action on what you're going to do. That's strategy, right? You show me a plan, I can look over the plan, I can tell you whether or not it's worthy of being supported. But if you're just going to come and say the DOJ report told us that we need the wellness center, and there's no plan behind it, how foolish am I? So I'm saying to your question, it's the cowardness, it's the non-questioning, it's the I'm going to fall in line, I want to be a team player part in a council person. And you should not become a council person if your intent is to gain friends and to fall in line with the typical day-to-day. I'm not that person, But, you know, my husband loves me, my children love me. And that's enough love for me. If the rest of the community is mad at me, I'm gonna do what's right, at least what I think is right.
We have a few questions in the room. Sure.
I was wondering if you would speak a little bit to over-policing and the DOJ report, bail reform, and the proposed new jail, the $400 million that would be spent on a new jail.
People get the jail mixed up with police headquarters and all of that, but yes, let me just say this about the jail. Maybe that's a lot of money. Again, we've not seen a plan. You know, I'm from banking, so I'm used to, you know, a plan. And I want to see the dollars and the cents. I want it to make sense. But the jail itself does need some renovating for sure. If you go into that facility, they've done some sprucing up with paint and here and there, but it is not designed for housing you know, inmates. It used to be, what building was it? Used to be an old MSD building or something. It was some office building and converted into a jail. And so, yes, it needs renovating. Does it need that much money to renovate? I don't know, because no one has offered the plan.
The people in the community that are the most active and who've been paying attention to the deaths in the jail. We have a far higher rate of deaths in our jail than they do in Rikers Island in New York City. Famously the most dangerous jail in the United States.
I don't think it's because of the design, though.
No.
It's lack of leadership, and it's the way it is run. And until, like I say, we ask the hard questions, get into it, and demand answers, it's going to always be the same.
Or we can decide that we don't need reform through building a bigger, better jail. We need reform by having less people in the jail.
Absolutely.
That we have appropriate delivery of mental health services and a way to deal with homeless people and a way to deal with the unhoused and a way to deal with people that are severely and materially, mentally ill that have no place to go.
And the false arrest.
And the rest of these people when there's a different approach that the DOJ did talk about in its findings. And back to the point you made about bail reform, that people shouldn't be in jail because they're poor. And most of the people in this jail are there because they're poor. And we're the only country that does it wrong this much, and does it wrong that leads to the deaths of those people. And so, again, I'm associated loosely with people who are doing great and hard work regarding the jail deaths and jail reform and things like that. And the first thing, I don't pretend to speak for them, but I know that I've heard them say many times, what we don't want is just a newer, bigger jail. Because they will fill up that jail.
And now they tell us there will not be any more beds in the jail. They're not looking for a bigger jail to house more inmates. That's what we have been told. That's what we're going to have to monitor as well.
But the problem that I have with this, and even the fact that we have to have this discussion, thank God that we have people like Councilwoman here and Councilwoman there and some others, apparently relatively few others, is that they're doing the hard work. It's easy for me to draw pictures with speeches, and it's easy for you all. It's great that you're here, but it's easy for you to come to meetings. She's the one that's doing the hard work, and I have such great respect for that. I remember talking to Morty McGarvey when he was a state senator, thinking, how do you even get a road in your district? Because you have to deal with those people on the other side, and they do, and people like her to do this all the time. But what really frustrates me about the DOJ report is they gave us a gift. And the gift wasn't necessarily the specific recommendations, and the gift isn't necessarily that we're going to get a court order that requires the police to change. The gift is they gave us the opportunity. They gave a mayor and a city council and elected representatives everywhere and other political leaders in the community to say, we need a do-over. Yeah. This is an opportunity not just to pick and reform and have maybe a better and bigger jail and maybe have more training or obviously build a rec center, a health center. It certainly didn't contemplate that the first official act the mayor was going to take with regard to the FOP was agree to secret negotiations over their contract. Exactly. You know, a lot about politics is message sending. Communities need hope. communities are battered and are tired of beating their head against the wall. And it would have been nice if the DOJ report, which happened to actually, right when the new administration was coming in, gave them a chance to say, you know what, I'll be fine the rest of my life if I never get reelected again. I'm going to do what I believe is the right thing. It's supported by smart and good people writing a dissertation and other things like that. And we're going to start over and we're going to do things. There's best practices of police forces in other cities. And one of them involves non-secret negotiation with the FOP. And I realize I can be a one-note Charlie when it comes to the police union, but it's true. And it was a message statement too. So the first in the same week we found that we're spending many millions of dollars on a health and fitness center, and we're going to negotiate with the FOP in secret. It doesn't give me hope, and it hurts. Go ahead.
I spoke out so loudly against the $17.5 million to the new health and wellness center and the new the new headquarters for the police. Not because I don't feel that they deserve to have as good of treatment and health and wellness as all of us, but I said the timing was wrong. And I said to them, until I see you do something that is going to right some wrongs of yesteryear and show the community that you're listening to them, then I'm not going to vote for this. Okay, I looked to the chief right in the face, and I said to the 50 or so officers who were in the chambers that day, I said, I would like to see if one of you would stand up and say, you don't want bad policemen on the force. Just one of you. And I wanted to see who would have the nerve to do it. To my surprise, one got up, another one got up. They all stood up. That was magical, but it was also performative.
Yeah, but
And I said, well, yeah, absolutely. And so the chief certainly had to stand up because her officers were standing up, and the kids had to stand up. So they all stood up. But I still used it to my advantage. I said, this is wonderful. I said, if you want the bad cops off the force, we want the bad cops off the force, the community wants the bad cops off the force, then get them off the force.
Got a question back here.
So this might be a bit rhetorical, but going back to the accountability piece, do you feel like it's more likely to approach it from a top-down approach, and you talked about the FOP and the chief, or a bottom-up, or is it a combination of both? I work for JCPS, and I kind of liken it to Marty Polio is a bit for us in the ether. He's not accessible, and so we rely. The functioning of the schools are largely dependent upon the principals, and which I think of as like the lieutenants and the sergeants. And if schools are run well, it's because of that. But those issues within a school, I don't think truly make it to Marty Polio. So how do we hit that middle administration that continues, the lieutenants and the sergeants that continue to move up, people of like mind that will continue to perpetuate the issues that we have? Like, who out there has a smarter brain than me that's like figuring out how to, like, where do you tackle it from?
Well, I tend to believe it's a combination of all. The chief, first of all. Well, no, let's start with the mayor. The mayor has to select a chief that will stand firm in conviction of making sure the department is held accountable. And she has to do that with her command staff, or he has to do it with the command staff. So the mayor must hold the chief accountable for doing that. The chief has to hold her command staff to a standard that says, if this behavior continues and we don't see a cultural shift in how they're policing, then you will be held accountable. And then she or he's going to have to prove that. The officers that come on the force, they absolutely come in on the day one thinking they're going to be great for the community. They're there to serve, to protect and serve. I believe that's what they really believe. Now, when they get trained, and then when they go ride with somebody who's been there for a while, things kind of change. And I believe that they also indoctrinate them to believe that you can do it the way you're trained, but that's going to kill you. That's going to get you killed. Or you can do it the way I'm telling you and save your life. I don't know what they're saying. I just made that up as an illustration. But there's something going on to make these officers shift and to make them think that they're going to always be protected, because they are, if they do something wrong. And until it changes, until the mayor holds the chief, and the chief holds the command staff, and the command staff holds the line staff accountable. And we see it, not just in written form. The DOJ report even talks about how they didn't even write things down. They didn't even keep a copy or a record of some of the things that they even discovered were bad.
When they were required to do so.
When
Yes.
they were
told to do
required.
so.
Yeah, so it's
But
all
so,
around.
in check. You remember in the 80s when Rudy Giuliani was America's mayor, when Rudy Giuliani was the mayor of New York, and he instituted a thing called broken windows policing. You all studied, many of you have studied broken windows policing, and the thing is, it worked for the reasons that they wanted it to work. And what I'm talking about is, if you don't know what I'm saying, is that basically the mayor, from the mayor on down, chief of police all the way to the patrolman, every day, every other day, whatever the record schedule was, they had reports, and the reports were fine-tuned. And it was broken window policing, because we're going to start cleaning up Manhattan, basically for the tourists, from the ground up. And there's going to be no litter, no trash, and the windows are going to be broken. And there was a political theory, Dr. Jones knows this well, I'm sure, that if people feel more comfortable walking on the streets, the visitors and tourists, then the place begins to look nicer and the crime goes elsewhere and all this stuff. It ended up being this enormous racist scam. However, the methods used proved, to your point, that the Marty Polios of the world, because this is so important, can have those meetings, and you can have that direct line of report, and you can have that level of responsibility and obligations making your way up. So that part of you advancing as a police officer is that you fill out those reports, that you are a team player for the team of Louisville, Kentucky, not for the FOP.
Right.
That's correct. Not only is it doable, but it has to happen. It just has to happen. And, you know, I've sat back. I mean, we've all seen chief after chief after chief come into this city. But we've also seen the same thing happen over and over and over again. So what is the answer? Is the answer to find that one chief of police out there that's good? No, it's accountability. And I mean, we all have something to do with it as well. You know, we're friends with the mayor. We've given him money, and you know, we want a favor. We want to be able to say we know the mayor. The mayor has come to my house. He comes to my Christmas card. Whatever. We need to hold the mayor accountable. I know if I have a really close friend and they're doing something really dumb, I am going to say that to my friend, because I don't want my friend to look foolish. I don't want my friend to get in trouble. So look at it as you're helping the mayor instead of you're hurting him, or you're accusing him, or you're giving him a hard time. I know the mayors of this city want support, but they're only going to get respect and support if they are doing what is right by the community of folks. And usually the people who are the least, the lost, and the often left behind, not the rich and famous.
So let me ask, I'm back here. Why did the mayor go back on his campaign promise to keep the negotiations open? He's not here to ask this question. I've asked him, but I don't get an answer. Why? What did the FOP have that caused him, forced him, it seems, to put it behind closed doors, the negotiations?
I don't know the answer.
I think it's somewhere
Is he afraid of them, like physically afraid? Seriously, why did officially what you did, why
There's something in the
never
negotiation.
real in the first place.
What did you just say?
Or the promise was
Or the
never.
promise was never real in the first place.
Okay.
Well, there's that. There's something in the negotiation contract that says it's closed negotiations. But so we're saying to the mayor, so what? Let's redo the contract. You know, what's wrong with starting there? With changing the language so you can make it open. Now, let me just say this though. If it's open, what does that look like? We can't all go into negotiations and start screaming, ah! You know, nothing to get done, right? So we have to figure out what that looks like.
And other cities have done it.
Other cities have done it.
That's why Louisville, in a lot of ways, and I'm a transplant, so you can criticize me for that. I'm originally from Ashland, but this is my adopted home, my chosen home, and I love it, and I'll be here the rest of my life. One of the things that, I've always noticed, though, in any organization I've been in, the political world, the business world, the law world, or any other world, is that we seem resistant to looking for best practices elsewhere. And I don't know why that is. We're either always reinventing the wheel, or we're so confident that the way we've been doing things is good enough, or there's a laziness, and I don't mean that individually, but there's an institutional laziness about it. But there are other places that have come out of consent decrees better. There are other places that have negotiated union contracts non-secretly. You know, there are other places that have improved their way of doing it, and there are other places that didn't need to have a consent decree that are policing right. Now, one of the points that the DOJ made was about the fact that because of Louisville City, I mean, the statistics and the findings in the report about the generational wealth gap and about there are a couple times when the gap in Louisville between a young black man or a black citizen, depending on the category, and any average white person in the city is the largest in the country. And so I would understand if maybe some other best practices wouldn't work, but we tend to not look.
I think we look, but we overlook. Yeah, I think we look. I think we know. And I think the people who are in these negotiations, the people who are making policies, they understand systemic racism. They understand how intentional things have occurred in this community, and they understand what power looks like. And they don't want to give any of that up. Until those of us with a voice, you don't have to be the most powerful person in this community, but you have a voice. And until we use our collective voices against the powers that be, that continue to perpetuate and keep in place those systemic issues that make our community so divided, then nothing's ever going to change. Because the people who are in power don't want it to change.
You want to educate a little bit about the consent decree process? The good news is, when the consent decree is entered into the court and then issued as an order, there's a binding and full-time independent monitoring process that takes place. So they aren't just running away from us. Their work here isn't done. That's the good news, and that also means that there will be continued opportunities for input. And God help us, nothing else happens as bad as what we've seen in the past. But if it does, that gets put into the mix. Bad news is that in those other cities that I did a very brief study of, ultimately, in the end, the community tires of the expense and the politics of, and just the sort of the drama that they don't care about because they haven't been made to care about of operating under a consent decree.
Yeah, I think maybe the city of Minneapolis City Council tried to enact an ordinance to say we want to stop this consent decree because it's costing our city too much. So if you hide behind cost, when in fact there's so many millions of dollars being spent on things that we don't necessarily need in this community, then nothing's ever going to change. Yeah, it's costly, and I think that I don't even like the fact that it's designed to be so costly, because we have to pay for the monitors that they put in place to monitor the process. That comes out of the city budget. It doesn't come out of the DOJ. doesn't come out of federal government, it comes out of the city's budget. So, you know, it's expensive, but it's necessary, because we've gotten ourselves into this.
Well, and I read that quote earlier about the commentator from one of the other cities that says, or actually a consultant that goes around with these consent decrees and said that the community's tired of the decrees and that the police know that they can wait it out. And one of the things that happens is they use the threat of, and fear and safety concerns to get the community to act against it.
Yes.
And I will say, and that was WLKY that was just here, and for somebody here from Wave, fine, I'll say this. Today, Wave TV, Wave News tweeted about some brutal crime that occurred. And of course, everybody in Louisville reading their feed goes, oh, because it's Wave, and they think, oh, this is a Louisville thing. Crime's out of control in Louisville, and now we got the DOJ telling us we can't have cops, or whatever they're thinking or saying. Well, Wave was just tweeting a story from Texas, because they're not owned locally. And they do that so that people read it, and then they go to the water cooler and say, this place is getting even more dangerous. Not only did they close Eddie Merlot's, but now this place, you can't, which by the way, there was a reason that I always took my family there, because you could always get a seat. But, yeah, but you got, I mean, I'm old enough, there used to be always just 3 networks and 3 network affiliates, and Wave is one of the major network affiliates, and it's irresponsible in the extreme for them to be posting stories about violent crime from 5 states over.
That's right.
But that's on purpose.
It's
That's on
also
purpose. And it's not on
irresponsible.
Fox.
Well, it's also irresponsible for when the media talks about whatever they want to make the headline, but they don't talk about how the pushback in the community said that officer that you're hailing as a hero is the same one that sicked the dogs on me. They didn't report that. So the community hears what they want to hear
Here's what they're presenting.
and what they're presenting.
We got a question back here.
Oh, go ahead.
Now come over.
I have a very personal question. I come to something like this and I feel fired up. I'm a suburban mom. I have 3 children. 2 of whom are white, 1 of whom is black. I spent a year protesting, starting downtown, then to St. Matthews and Prospect. Had guns pointed at me, had a motorcycle come up on the sidewalk at us. A Proud Boy rode by and showed us his tattoo. I volunteer for the past 10 years weekly at Boys and Girls Club because I think this is a multi-pronged problem and we can come at it in different ways. But I leave here and I go back to my bubble where I'm safe, I'm white, and I can say, well, I went to that. I attended that. I get kudos for going. But I feel like I need action steps. From this, what do I do? I don't need to go hold a sign on the corner that says the DOJ. I can call my council person, but for a normal suburban mom, what are some action steps that we can hold our elected officials accountable, we can demand change in the police force? I don't want to just go back to my little bubble.
Well, you'll lose friends.
Let's give her a
I don't have an answer. I don't think there's the answer, and I don't know whether the
Well, as a white man,
yeah.
from that perspective, see what do you think? Because you were on the streets, you were there in the 2020 civil unrest, right in the pack of it. So share with the crowd some of the things that you did, just from a moral standpoint.
Well, what I was saying was, and there were more than me, and
Yes.
that's good. Many people in this room. My first thought with you is you are going back to your bubble, but none of us live in a bubble anymore because we have our phones and our iPads, right? And that's why the first thing that I said to you in response was that you're going to lose friends. And because one of my suggestions is that, Wave 3, I guess it's Wave 3, right? Wave 3 has a lot more followers than you do. They have a lot more fans than you do. They have a lot more people that read the crap that they have written. But you have some. And, it's the old Robert Kennedy quote about a ripple in a pond, right? And the circles increase and it gets larger and larger, and you said it probably a lot better than I just did, but it's something like that. And you can begin to amplify. Okay, I did it. I did the classic lawyer thing. I talked for 2 minutes, and now I have the answer.
That's what pastors do.
But it was not always. You can develop a network, and you can amplify the things that others are saying. One of the things I said during 2020 is, and I didn't come up with this, but you would see on Facebook the quote that you always wondered what you would do during the civil rights era of 1965. Well, you're doing it right now, and if you're not doing anything, then that's what you were doing, and that's who you are. One of the things that I chose to do was to let people know about the councilwomen of the world. When she tweets something, I retweet it. When Ricky Jones, on occasion, I have to edit what Dr. Jones says. but I will amplify what he says. And if I have 10 followers, that's fine. That's 10 more people who will hear what Sadiqa Reynolds has to say, who will hear what Hannah Drake has to say, who will hear what any number of people, who will hear what Emily has to say about the community that all these people love. And again, if you have 10 people who will read that, and you'll lose 2 of those people as friends and associates, and they may not come to your derby party, but the people that you'll gain will be closer to you, and you'll feel better about those people, I believe. And maybe if 5 of those people amplify what other people say, you don't have to be the speech maker. You don't have to do anything original. You just press reply. You just press share or retweet or whatever it is. That's one very minor thing, but it is a community conversation, and we've got to develop critical mass. And
that's what listen, learn, and act is all about.
And that's what they're doing here. So you did more than just come here tonight. You're going to go home and you have a message to send somehow, and you'll do it the way that you can still go to Thanksgiving this year. Possibly.
I've been posting for a year about it, and I have lost friends, and my husband had people come up to him and say, "What the heck is wrong with your wife?
Yeah.
What has gotten into her?"
Yeah, you might lose a husband. I mean, it may not just be friends. It may not just be friends. It may be a husband, but yeah.
But there's a fear of being conformative in posting about it. That, oh, look at me, look what I did. And so it's a fine line.
Yes, it is.
Of I want to share this message, but I'm doing more than share it. I'm acting on it. So I get what you're saying.
And I don't have the answers.
So if you have anything to share.
Well, you keep doing what you're doing, first of all, and don't buckle under the pressure. Because, when I, again, I represent constituents who don't look like me and who want answers, who want me to share my Black experience so that they can feel good, because they know a Black person. But so, all I can say is it starts at the heart. It's a heart matter, and you have to not want to feel guilty, and that's what a lot of my constituents have said to me. But I don't want to feel guilty. I didn't do anything. I'm a good person. All those things are true. But now it's up to you to help change things. If you're such a great person, you really care. Now you have to act.
Right?
Because to do nothing, yes.
No, I was going to but it kind of circles back to the first thing you said. This woman, looking like she does, didn't hear about the Tulsa race massacre until she left Tulsa and school.
Wow.
So, to my point about you in Prospect, Mothers for Liberty are marching across our country, trying to make our children learn less about the real history of the United States than more. Now, this isn't about the DOJ report directly, and it isn't about a march this summer directly. It's really the long play.
Yeah.
But in the end, how this country moves forward, in my opinion, my very humble opinion, is that 60 years from now, our grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and for some of you great-grandchildren, are going to, not you, you and I don't have grandchildren. We
No.
never talked about that.
But I'm old enough to have.
So their children will be perhaps the first generation of Americans that learn the truth about American history.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing, not a bad thing. They're going to feel bad about it, and that's good. And then they're going to take these steps to go forward. So you're not going to run for mayor anytime soon, perhaps. You're not going to run for city council, perhaps. But there'll be school board meetings where your kids go to school. And there'll be people fighting there to get rid of CRT, which doesn't exist, of course, at your school, but they're going to say that it does. And that just means stuff about black people. And you can be there and be a voice saying, yeah, no, that's not the direction we need to head in.
So, to that point, the people that are really trying to get rid of the learning and the teachings of black history, you're going to have to vote them out of office.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
that
There you
simple.
go.
And it's really that simple.
Yeah. Question over here. Mary
Okay,
Beth.
I have the microphone, they tell me. I couldn't figure out how to work it. Okay, my question, I think I'm cynical about consent decrees and the monitoring that takes place. I feel like if we don't have something that's observable and measurable that they're monitoring, we're going to reduce the whole process down to a report that's hundreds of pages long with nice words that do nothing to change relationships and policing or the status of everybody in the city being on some equal playing field. So is there hope that maybe that decree will have something that's observable and measurable that's not, how many parking tickets did you give this week?
There are some measurable things that the
Observable, please.
and observable as well. You should see less people being pulled over for a tail light out or and being black. You should see less people being displayed on the news that are targeted, being arrested, and you don't, know, the other side of the story. Maybe the white kid got away. So there are some things that you will be able to notice in the actions of the police officers. And now, right now, you're probably not even observing them. When you see a police officer, and this is not a trick question, but think about this. When you see an officer pull a black kid over to the side, are you looking at the behavior of the officer, or are you looking at the black kid and wondering, what did he do now?
The officer.
I'm looking at the officer now.
With my camera.
That's a question that you have to ask yourself. It's not always the perpetrator that you see, or so-called perpetrator. You got to wonder about, is it the police officer that's pulling this person over unintentionally or unlawfully? I mean, intentionally, but unlawfully.
I have a question.
The other end.
Is this recording available
Yes.
to all of us
Yes.
so we can share?
Yes. I will send it out to everyone that's registered tomorrow.
I think we have time for one more question, and Gerard gets the final word. Question.
I don't know if I need this, but we talk about the DOJ report, and these are some of the things that we're not doing well in our community. Who's doing it right? I mean, do you all know if Eric, you said earlier, I thought I heard that there are some people or whatever, there's people who do it. Who are those? Because I'd like to really kind of look to as well and say, oh, understand what they're doing, how they're doing it. If others aren't going to go, aren't bold enough to go and say, let's pursue best practices, I'd still would like to know from us, say, who are these communities that are doing it right?
Well, the Seattle mayor put out a statement saying that he was so thankful for their consent decree and that he sees the changes that have occurred and they're continuing to change things and that evidently it worked for them. So maybe that's a start. Look into Seattle and see what they're doing and perhaps speak up to the DOJ as they come into town and hear from us what we want to see in our consent decree and say, hey, Seattle did it this way. Let's try doing it this way.
All right, it's 8:30. Does anyone else have anything they want to say? This has been just wonderful
incredible.
conversation. I think we tapped into several things. Go ahead, Mark.
No, I just said thank you.
Oh.
Yeah.
And, you know, some of the questions about what we can do, and it seems so small, but we need to stay engaged. We have an incident with a Breonna Taylor, or we have an incident, you know, on a bus stop, or we have an incident, and everybody goes up in arms, and it's horrible, and then we all trickle off and go back our daily business. So we've got to learn to stay involved. It is not about one incident. It's about everything. It's about everyone in the community. So whether it's retweeting, whether it's you know, doing any of the things that we've talked about, certainly following this next 6 months or year that we're going to be looking at this DOJ report and actually whether or not it's implemented. How can we, as a community, as citizens, be involved? How can we actually participate?
Can I just say, the first step is to read the report. Read the DOJ report. You'll be amazed at what you find in that report. And you'll find yourself in that report saying, this is what I can do. Or, I've never thought about it this way. I'm going to start thinking about it in this manner. Read the DOJ report. It's 68 pages, but it's a good read.
I want to answer that.
Type in DOJ report.
I want to answer the question that was posed about other communities that are doing well, and it's to invite you to come on May 15th. Ed Harness, who's our city inspector general. He was at Albuquerque, and they had a consent decree. And apparently Albuquerque made enough progress that the Department of Justice let them go on their own to police themselves and continuing it. And I think Ed Harness was the Inspector General there. And so come next time, and he'll talk about that. And at least that will be one example that we can study. And yeah, you've done a good job.
And also, thank you to all you.
Coming up. Take our art to stay engaged, our anti-racism challenge that'll start July 1st.
Right.
Thank you for being here, and thanks to our speakers.
Oh my gosh, thank you all so much.
Thank you all for being here. Can we give you 2 weeks from now?